Hi, my name is Juliane and I'm a practitioner in the Plum Village tradition under Zen master Thich Nhat. And today I'm going to talk about the LGBTQIA+ community in the Plum Village tradition. So when I first came to Plum Village, which was in 2019, the first calligraphy I saw was "Be beautiful, be yourself." And I must say, I find this very appealing to queerness, which is why I named my little talk, "Be beautiful, be yourself." So before I go into detail and talk about the LGBTQIA+ community, I would like to give a short introduction about the practice in Plum Village as well as Zen master Thich Nhat. I'm sure that all of you know Thich Nhat, but I would like to name some important facts about the Zen master. Thich Nhat gained worldwide attention through his involvement in the Vietnam War, in which he acted as a patron of a Buddhist peace movement. This movement was born on the principles of engaged Buddhism, a term Thich Nhat himself created to take Buddhist philosophy out of the monastic context and place it in a global context where it would contribute to solving social, environmental, and economic problems. In the spirit of engaged Buddhism, Thich Nhat founded his own monastic order in 1965 under the name Order of Interbeing. And due to his activities in the Vietnam War, Thich Nhat was forced to flee into exile to France, where he founded the Plum Village Monastery, which is one of the biggest mindfulness practice centers in Europe. After spending more than 40 years in exile in France, Thich Nhat was granted entry back into Vietnam in 2018. Now 95 years old, the Zen master returned to his original monastery in Hue, where he currently resides after suffering a severe stroke in 2014. So I have already mentioned mindfulness, and yes, we all practice mindfulness in Buddhism, and I would like to give a short introduction to the mindfulness practice in Plum Village. So there are various forms of mindfulness practice, such as sitting or walking meditation, housework, such as, for example, mindful dishwashing, mindful exercise, that means gymnastics, or for example, qigong, and mindful communication. The latter is a crucial aspect in the practice. We call it Dharma sharing in the Plum Village tradition, which is about deep listening and mindful speech. So you can just imagine a circle of people or a sangha of people who share from their heart what's going on in their practice, in their lives, what their concerns are, and others listen deeply, which means they listen mindfully to what the speakers are sharing. And in this way, you can cultivate compassion, you can cultivate loving kindness, equanimity, and joy, as well as tolerance and inclusion. And especially for people from the queer community who have to face discrimination, exclusion, torture, I find this is a very crucial practice because they can speak about what's going on in their lives while other people listen deeply, listen mindfully, and yeah, they show understanding to the people who share. And as we all know, we're all interconnected, which is derived from the Buddhist concept of interdependent co-arising, or pratitya samutpada in Sanskrit. This is called interbeing in the Plum Village tradition. And it's very important to notice the fact that we're interconnected, because that justifies also the Dharma sharing and the need to be compassionate around each other, to understand other, and to listen deeply and be there for each other. So talking about LGBTQIA+, I must say that it started in the 1990s. And there was a conference in 1996 under the title Being Wonderfully Together, where the inclusion of marginalized people were announced. And from this point, from this conference on, there were queer sanghas established, and there were pride events that were incorporated in the practice or in the retreats. And there were rainbow families in almost every retreat, and you can practice Dharma sharing in these families. And another important fact is that there is an annual rainbow retreat, which is organized in cooperation with the European Institute of Applied Buddhism, or in short, Ayya. So I shared a little bit about the practice in Plum Village, and here on this slide, you can see the history of the queer community in Plum Village. But what does Buddhism or Thich Nhat Hanh say about queerness? I found a really nice and positive quotation in one of Thich Nhat Hanh's book called Answers from the Heart, Practical Responses to Life's Burning Questions. The spirit of Buddhism is inclusiveness. Looking deeply into the nature of a cloud, we see the cosmos. A flower is a flower, but if we look deeply into it, we see the cosmos. Everything has a place. The base, the foundation of everything is the same. When you look at the ocean, you see different kinds of waves, many sizes and shapes, but all the waves have water as their foundation and substance. If you're born gay or lesbian, your ground of being is the same as mine. We're different, but we share the same ground of being. The Protestant theologian Paul Tillich said that God is the ground of being. You should be yourself. If God has created me as a rose, then I should accept myself as a rose. If you're a lesbian, then be a lesbian. Looking deeply into your nature, you will see yourself as you truly are. You will be able to touch the ground of your being and find peace. So when Thich Nhat Hanh says the spirit of Buddhism is inclusiveness, he refers to two important facts. The first fact is the same ground of being. If we look at the sentence, a flower is a flower, but if we look deeply into it, we see the cosmos. So a flower is not just a flower. A flower is made of non-flower elements, such as water, such as earth, such as the sun. So you can say the flower is connected to the cosmos. The flower contains the cosmos. And the same is true for us humans. We are deeply interconnected with the cosmos. And if you want to say it in a more theological way, such as Paul Tillich, you can say the cosmos is God. And although we share the same ground of being, which is the cosmos or God, we have many sizes and shapes. We're all different. We have different characters, sexes, genders. We perceive ourselves in a unique way, or everyone perceives themselves in their own way. But we share the same ground of being. And if that ground of being, or the cosmos, or God, has shaped yourself as gay, as lesbian, intersex, transsexual, then you can be true, and then you can be beautiful in your true colors. So Thich Nhat Hanh encourages us to look deeply into our own nature, into our ground of being, and see how that ground of being has shaped us. And if we realize that we are transsexual, gay, lesbian, whatever we perceive ourselves to be, then this is our true nature. So we're beautiful in ourselves. But there's another effect of inclusiveness. thinking about that we all have an inherent Buddha nature, it means that we're all capable of transforming our own pain, transforming our suffering into well-being, into compassion, loving kindness, joy, equanimity, tolerance, inclusion. And if we think a little bit more about inclusiveness, right now, in this moment, when you're listening to me, we're practicing Buddhist inclusiveness. You come from different Buddhist traditions. You have different background in your studies. We have different characters, different genders. We're all different, but right now we're practicing inclusiveness in this moment. However, I know that there are some of you who had to face discrimination, even in your Buddhist Sangha. And I know that even though my Buddhist tradition is very inclusive, is very tolerant, is very understanding and compassionate, I know that there are Buddhist traditions where that might not be possible, where also thinking of women, I know that there are some Buddhist traditions where they cannot fully ordain. So in some way, we have to say that there is discrimination. And if you think about that way, we can also ask ourselves, how can we put inclusiveness in Buddhist practice? How can we put feminism, or better to say equality, in Buddhist practice? I basically think that Dharma actually is equality. But yeah, I've heard stories from all of you that say that, yeah, some of you have to face discrimination. So the big question is, how can we practice inclusiveness? How can we practice equality? I'd like to share another quotation. This is a quotation by Brother Phab Hai. And what I really like in the Plum Village tradition is that there are monastics who administrate queer sanghas and who are there for queer people. And Brother Phab Hai is one of them. And he says in a video to the queer community, where he talks about the Q in queer as questioning, the willingness to question all of our assumptions and belief. And the way we do things, it's fundamental, I believe, for queerness. To be in that space of not taking things for granted, of being willing to embark and remain for the whole of our lives on a journey of discovery of what this world is, what we are, and what our real situation is. So Q in queer cannot be seen as only questioning your gender, for example, or your sexuality, but it's about questioning your beliefs and assumptions, your situation. You have to question yourself, what's going on here? Am I being discriminated? How is this situation? And I also think that this is a fundamental question for us as queer Buddhists. We can think about a lot of the time, maybe. Yes, I'm almost finished with my little talk. But I think the two main questions I would like to give to my audience is questioning, as Brother Phab Hai says, our assumptions and beliefs. And the other thing is, how can we practice Buddhist inclusiveness? Yes, here's a lotus for all of you. And I must refer one last time to Thich Nhat Hanh and one of his books. There's a book called No Mud, No Lotus, in where Thich Nhat Hanh refers to the fact of transforming your suffering into well-being, meaning insights and wisdom, as well as happiness. And a lotus is a sign for insight, wisdom, and also happiness. And personally, I think a lotus can shine in your true colors. And when your true colors are blue, they're blue. When they are intersex, they're intersex. When they're transsexual, they're transsexual. And this is why I have the queer lotus for all of you in rainbow colors. And this lotus goes out to all of you. And I say, be beautiful, be yourself, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Juliane Amberger. That was really an interesting talk, very beautiful. To our next speaker, because later in the panel, we will have the discussion. I think that will be a very exciting discussion then. Yes, our second speaker is Venerable Ayya Yeshe, and I was lucky to become acquainted to her on a Sagarira International Conference on Buddhist Women in Yogyakarta, Indonesia, on Java in 2015. They were sat together in the heat under a tree and had a little chat. And I thought, oh, I must have her on the conference when I am ready to do it. So I'm happy to introduce her here as one of our venerable contributors. Ayya Yeshe is a Buddhist nun of 21 years who has trained in Tibetan Buddhism and in Theravada. She is the abbess of a non-sectarian Mahayana temple in the World Heritage of Tasmania, Australia. It must be beautiful, like paradise. So in my view, Ayya is a contemplative feminist activist and international teacher. She is the director of Bodhicitta Foundation, a charity in the slums of central India, empowering women and children. You can find Bodhicitta Foundation also on Instagram and follow. Ayya also has 100,000 hits on her sacred chants on YouTube and is a published author. Today, she will speak about the accidental nun of the slums. Welcome, Ayya Yeshe. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Jampa and Juliane and everyone. Can you hear me? Yep, it's a pleasure to be here. There's a storm on the horizon, so hopefully my connection won't die. Okay, so I thought I'd just quickly say that, you know, the queer aspect of my life as a nun before I go into my work in India. You know, I was fairly middle class and normal before I ordained as a Buddhist nun, although I was a hippie. But as soon as I became a nun, it's like suddenly my white privilege and my veneer of normalcy went away, and I became an oddity, and people like stare at me in the street and they don't really know what you are. You know, it's like wearing a Big Bird costume. And suddenly all my friends became queer people, and you know, or people of color, or single mums, like people who were in some way marginalized by society. And suddenly I could understand what they were talking about, because my role in society had changed. I became an outsider. And that's, you know, my introduction to queer culture in a way, and the idea, the intersections of justice and queerness. And I sometimes feel like an interloper because I'm bi. You know, when you're bi, you have a foot in both worlds. You can pass for straight, and you can play the queer card when you want to. And I thought, you know, I don't really play the queer card too often because I'm not oppressed by that identity. But I was just thinking now, like, actually, I was oppressed by that identity because my homophobia was so internalized that it took me until I was about 40 to actually come out as a bi woman. And even though one of the first people I fell in love with was a woman, pre-nun. They're like, oh, Ayya. So, you know, actually, yeah, but what I started to see as soon as I became a nun was patriarchy. And patriarchy is so much more rigid in a traditional religious setting. You know, and you just the unbelievable, like the things that happen inside Buddhism would not happen in normal settings, you know, like a lama just saying to you, pray to be reborn as a man, and meaning well by it, like trying to help you. Or like, you can't be like us. How about you answer the phones and clean the toilet? You'll make good karma and be born as a man. And I'm just like, what? Like, there are people who literally think this way, and they're not malicious. It's just so ingrained in their culture. Their culture has been thrown from a medieval place into the modern world in the space of 50 years. And, you know, religion is the last bastion of more orthodox, old-fashioned ideas, you know. So I think the queer, the homophobia comes out, the sexism comes out, the kind of ethnocentricity comes out as well. And I just like, as a nun, it took me quite a while. I felt very frustrated in some way, and I thought, this must be me, you know. But actually then I realized exactly what the meaning of the word glass ceiling is, you know, because I realized, like, here us Western nuns are running the entire temple, but we're being charged rent to stay in it, and the Tibetan lamas stay for free. You know, and I just started to kind of understand what people of color and queer people were talking about when they spoke about white heteropatriarchy, and how it's an invisible force that, you know, that limits us reaching our potential, us loving ourselves, us flourishing and having a voice. And how sometimes Buddhist ideas of non-self or other things are weaponized, or spiritual bypassing is employed to say, you're a Buddhist nun, you're supposed to be humble, you're not supposed to be asking for human rights or equality. Gender doesn't matter. Gender doesn't matter when gender is no longer an issue. When you're not oppressed by your gender or your sexual identity, then it doesn't matter. Until then, it absolutely does matter, because it's killing people. Homophobia kills people. Transphobia kills people. Poverty kills people. Patriarchy kills women and makes men miserable, to be honest. And the interesting thing is, you know, all of these things are, this is the beauty of intersectional feminism. All of these things, all of these oppressions are connected. So women's rights are human rights. Trans people's rights are human rights. Queer people's rights are human rights. And that's why those of us who believe in justice need to come together and build a beloved community and solidarity. And, you know, I have trans friends coming to me asking where they can ordain, because there's this kind of really old-fashioned, obsolete rule that says, anyway, I know Ayya Vimala is going to go into that later on, but these issues matter. You know, I have a queer monk friend who committed suicide. You know, and I have queer monk friends and nun friends who can't find a monastery to stay in because of the toxic masculinity or homophobia, or them just being more sensitive, you know, and just maybe they're not so gender conforming or something, you know, that it's hard to live in single sex monasteries. And that's why I'm very determined to make both the center we have in India and the center we have in Australia queer safe spaces as much as I can, you know, because I'm not someone who's kind of lived my whole life out and out queer, but I've definitely lived my life out and out marginalized outsider. So I have some black sheep idea. when I speak about justice, I find the people who click onto it so quickly are queer people, because they understand, and people of color, because they understand what it's like to be not embraced, to be marginalized, and that is a terrible thing, but it also means that those people are more empathetic, and they care about justice. And this is why queer culture is such a beautiful thing. And queer people have been at the spearhead of social justice movements, for decades. Anyway, I'm running out of time. So, and also I have to say, I have queer people coming to me in India, which is an even worse place to be a queer person, and, kind of wondering where they can find place. One of the kids I'm really close to is a trans young man, and there's just no facilities available. Imagine being a so-called low caste person, appearing female and trans in India. So yeah, I mean, it's huge. It's huge. The issues. And at first I was afraid, because where I live in India, it's like the 1950s, people can be fired for being gay. People make jokes about being queer. There's not even a proper word for trans people. It's like a joke. And a lot of trans women or hijiras have to actually beg on the street or do sex work. They don't have a choice. No one will give them a job, although things are changing. But anyway, so we've tried to, I just came out and said, look, this is a queer safe space. If you don't like it, go, so we had to do that. Anyway, I never intended to start a charity in a slum. I mean, I guess I'm just sharing this because I just wanted to show a slice of how diverse our queer universe is, that, so there's this nun in this far, galaxy far, far away. Anyway, I never intended to be a social worker, but I went to India. I tried to study. I found it was completely ethnocentric and patriarchal. I'm not great with languages, so I didn't really fit into the Tibetan diaspora, and you'll always be a pleb. You'll always be the one cleaning the bathroom. You'll never graduate. There's no full ordination. It's really tough as a woman and as a Westerner. There's just no place for you. Even though we're the main supporters, women are actually the main supporters of Buddhism. We don't really have a voice, and the men are on the throne. And it's like the Catholic Church, it's so, I mean, the least progressive part of the Catholic Church. So I kind of broke away from that after many years, and I just became like a freelance nun. Plus, I just couldn't get support. I ordained with 15 people, and most of them, 13 of them have disrobed due to lack of support. We have a 90% disrobing rate. Anyway, I went to central India where the Ambedkarite people, the people from so-called the lowest caste, for a few thousand years have been enslaved and forced to do the most degrading kind of work, like picking up dead animals, cleaning toilets, working in fields of the rich people for no money, cleaning houses, that kind of thing. And the PC term for them is people of scheduled caste, or Dalits, and they're previously known as untouchable. And these people, up till like 50 years ago, could be beaten for going into a Hindu temple. The women are regularly gang raped and are still gang raped. They often don't own land. If a man shows too much pride, even turns up to his wedding on a horse, he can be beaten to death, lynched. It's kind of like African-American people were in the 50s or 60s. It hasn't progressed beyond that. And these people, like a couple of 100 years ago, they used to have to carry a palm leaf tied behind them to erase their footprints. They couldn't walk into certain parts of the village. They had to bang a bell to warn people that this so-called unclean person was coming. But way before this, 2,600 years ago, the Buddha allowed scheduled caste people into the Sangha and said, you're not noble by your birth, you're noble by your actions. So the Buddha was incredibly progressive. And at a time where women were seen as property, after some, questioning, because the monks were living under trees, right? So the Buddha was like, where are we going to put them? How will we keep them safe? But after some, questioning, he allowed women into the Sangha as well, which is just way ahead of the time, Anyway, the Martin Luther King Jr. of these people is Dr. Ambedkar, who was one of the first scheduled caste people to get an education. And he studied at Columbia and Oxford, I think, one prestigious university in England as well, law and economics. And he later became a member of parliament, but he couldn't even find a room to rent when he returned to India. And people can tell by your surname what your caste is. 75% of people in India still marry within their caste. So it's still a huge problem. And it's a very pernicious, malicious system whereby people who are the same are, it's a way of preserving privilege and sanctified by God, So this idea of inferiority is internalized, and this violence is passed down generations. And so I was in Bodh Gaya one day where the Buddha got enlightened, and there's a great deal of poverty, and girls are married at like 15, people are dead by 45, they pop out 10 kids. It's very corrupt, very poor. The roads are potholed. And there's these two worlds, there's the world of the air-conditioned, marble-ensconced meditation retreat for foreigners, which is silent and air-conditioned, and the 6-foot-high barbed wire fence. And then outside is the desperate poverty of people, who who suffered from polio and are severely disabled, begging at the temple gate where the Buddha got enlightened, and I just looked at these extremes. And because I speak Hindi, I understand how bad it is. You can buy a child in India for $2,000 in Bodh Gaya. And Buddhist people do, I'm telling you, there's, anyway, let's not go there. But, and I just looked at this extreme and I thought, if the Buddha was here, which side of this barbed wire fence would he be on? And as soon as I thought, the Buddha gave the world a great gift, and the Buddha was Indian, and the Buddha was a man of the people. The Buddha stood for love, compassion, and justice is how love looks in public. So as soon as I thought that I should help Indian people, and the most oppressed Indian people are girls and women, 22% of Indian girls are married below the age of 18. Women do 60% of the world's work and own 10% of the world's land. 137 women a day are murdered by men who claim to love them. So as soon as I thought that, this Indian man appeared and asked me where he could get Buddhist teachings. And I'm like, what? Because I thought, I never met an Indian man who was Buddhist. I just knew Hindus and Muslims and some Parsis. And then he told me about Dr. Ambedkar. So just wave at me, Jampa, when I've hit my time.
Some minutes I give you, but I think we should have a little break between the panel. Yeah.
Okay. So have I hit my time already?
I can give you another 3-4 minutes. Okay.
Gotcha. Okay. Very generous. So yeah, so I went to Nagpur, and I saw, I was invited by everyone to pray over their family, and I was, treated like a god, and incense was waved in front of me, and my feet were washed by hand, and I just realized I wasn't actually helping anybody. And one day somebody put a dying baby in my arms and said, please pray for her, please do a puja. And I just thought, this baby needs diarrhea medicine. It costs $2. That is nothing for me. That is a lot for these people, but that is nothing for me. I have white privilege. And then I started a charity called Bodhicitta Foundation. And we have 4 study centers for primary age children because the schools are not good. We sponsor 55 kids for school. We make 7,000 meals per year for undernourished children. We have a women's job training center where we teach sewing, English, computers, and beauty therapy because it's a good money maker. And we have a domestic violence counseling and legal service for women because the women don't own their own land. They're a guest in their husband's house. I regularly see women set on fire by men. I think about 80% of the slum men hit women. Gay people have sham marriages because it's too shameful, or they commit suicide. It's too shameful to be queer. People are poor and desperate, but there is a sense of hope and things are changing. Dr. Amberger fought for scheduled caste people's rights to government jobs and free study in government colleges. So things are slowly improving. I never expected for my life to go down this path, but I spent 10 years in India, and our charity is still going. I go there 3 months a year now, and I, have weekly meetings, time to end. So, I mean, I guess this is part of the beautiful intersection, the beautiful interbeing between justice and, Buddhism. You can't be spiritual without justice. So that's my trip. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your wonderful talk and giving a view about your work. That is a phenomenon. Thank you.